I wanted to say a few more things about unions, since recently one of the union leaders that I was familiar and most people are familiar with died, a man named Trumka. And we are looking at the future and the world of work. It could be a very different world relatively soon because, well, there are more mechanical and computer jobs that are being done automatically. So that if you are a laborer, let's say working in a store, or if you are a truck driver, then you would have a self driving truck very soon take your place, and there's probably going to be a very efficient and neat machine that will stock the shelves at the local Target or whatever. These things are coming, and they're not that far fetched. It used to seem far fetched, but it's not anymore. So, what that means is that there's going to be more production in each business, but there's less workers and there's less jobs for people to do. And what we're looking at right now is who is in control of the way that people will be living in the future. Let me step back and do my history lesson. I like to do. You know, that used to be you were a serf tied to the land, and then the Industrial Revolution came along, and they had child labor, and people worked 15 hours a day, and they if they didn't show up for work, they would be fired. If they broke their leg, they would just throw them outside the front door of the factory. And read The Jungle by Upton St. Clair. It'll give you all that. Well, the unions came along, and at first it was, it was hated just like it is now, where they had pitched battles in the street. My grandfather and my grandmother were somewhat involved in this, but the businesses hired these bulls and the local police to beat up all the striking workers. Because what workers would do in order to be able to have like a 40-hour work week or something like that, or a minimum wage, they would stop anybody from going into the factory, and nobody could work. So the factory would have to suffer financially unless they dealt with the workers. And this went on, this battle went on for, 50, 70 years in the United States. And the upper hand was reached after World War II, whereas they had many years of Franklin Roosevelt, then they had Harry S. Truman, and even Eisenhower, who was a somewhat pro worker type of president for a Republican. And that situation at that time was that the average working man could work a job 40 hours a week, purchase a home, and raise a family. The wife would stay home and take care of the family, and that was possible back then. So how have we gotten to this point now where the vast majority of people can barely keep their heads above water in the United States, while there's a few very extremely wealthy billionaires owning everything? How did we get to that? Well, I think one of the milestones in this progression was 1981, when Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers who were on strike for safer work conditions and so forth. They wanted more money and less hours. Imagine that. And Ronald Reagan said, if you don't come back to work in 48 hours, we're going to fire you all. And he did. And that was a milestone in that the fact that people that owned companies and so forth realized that they could just start fighting back. And they spent millions of dollars in anti-union campaigns. The companies did, the manufacturers, the American Manufacturers Association and places like that, spent millions of dollars in media money to tell you that the unions were corrupt and the unions didn't do anything for you, and they pretty much won that battle. There are a bunch of dopey people in the world, retarded people, not very smart, who work crappy jobs, and they vote for the Republicans. There's stupid people out there. As we're watching the standard of living deteriorate as they quash any ability by a worker to have a say in how the workplace goes. And that's what this Trump, that was his message all the way along. What, are you stupid? Yes, they're stupid. You know, that nobody ever lost an election by underestimating the American people's IQ, I suppose. Whose quote was that? Yes, it's now coming to a new thing that people are complaining about, and I at one point lament about this, but this current generation, what you call the Generation Z, I guess is what you can call them. We can call them what you want, but they're mad at the boomers for sucking up all the Social Security and busting the deficit and everything. But they're also mad at the employers. They don't want to work. And you look at this, if you're me or you're some old fogey like me who's worked my entire life, just one day after another, work. And now I'm receiving Social Security. Well, gee, how did I get that? Well, I worked like 48 years of my life, you know, and that's, I paid into it. But these kids today, and you want to say, well, they're just lazy. They have no work ethic. They don't understand what it takes to get by in the world. And I have a tendency to want to say that. But I also feel that maybe they have a point. You know, and I'm afraid to say this, but maybe they have a point. Maybe there is no future. You know, if you look at a lot of people in the world today, in my age, younger than me, who have worked, I see them, I work with them in my job. I'm working right now as a lot of people my age are retired, but there is these people who just struggle to get by, and they've been working their whole life, and the way the situation goes in the work world, you know, the work world mutates around you, and you have to adapt to it. You know, when I was graduated from high school, I had a job, a union shop, and I made enough money as a 19-year-old to, get my own apartment, 3-bedroom apartment I had, and I could buy food and clothing and drive a car that I paid for that with a 40, 50 hour a week job. And that was no training whatsoever. It was a factory job. Well, those factories are gone. Who makes those? They're made over in Mexico. They're made down in Asia someplace, those things. Those factories are gone. People who are doing the same job I was doing, they're barely scrounging by. And that's the way it is in America today. You don't really have that many good jobs out there, especially for people who are uneducated. And here's another thing, that the whole education system is a scam, as a lot of the Generation Zs have come to the conclusion. They tell you, and this is a marketing ploy by the colleges and universities, that if you go to college, you will earn 60% to 100% more in your lifetime than someone with just a high school education. Now, that's a statistic that was taken in a moving target. In other words, it was a snapshot for 1 year. But so what happens now is that all these young people are going to college, they're studying hard, they want to be diligent, they want to make a lot of money, they want to live a good life, and they end up going to the best college they can go to, which is a scam in many ways. because they charge you when you get out of college. Sometimes they have $150,000 debt hanging over their heads, and $200,000 debts hanging over their head, and $50,000. Now here you are, you're 23 years old, let's say, graduating from college, and you want to get out started in the world, maybe get a family, get a job and get a family, and you got a $200,000 debt hanging over your head, and maybe you can get a good job, and maybe not. Maybe there's not as many good jobs out there as you thought, so you have to work at the local burger place, or as a waitress, or taking care of old people in a nursing home, and you make like $10 an hour, so you have to work. That's the way life is nowadays. And these people who thought they were going to be making it big took out these gigantic loans from these universities who, ching, oh, another sucker, They teach you, I don't know, art history, or I suppose, I could talk differently about education, but my point is it's so damn expensive for these kids, and they're hurting themselves by going to college. So a lot of the Generation Z kids have opted not to go to college and opted not to work, and get away with as little work as they possibly can. Move into communal homes, or live with their parents, or it's things that my generation didn't do so much, but they're doing it. And people like me, the old fogies, say, well, you're just lazy. But I'm looking at it too. Maybe they got a point. Maybe this is the way to treat, you don't need to buy into this, I have to be a good worker. I must be a diligent student so I can grow up and be a good worker. And then, expecting a fair shake from your employers, because your employers never give you a fair shake. They're They run their white-collar people through these ringers of, trying to outcompete each other to make it to the top, and they're stabbing each other in the back and stabbing their workers in the back so that they can move up. That's what the American business is bred. And since they destroyed the unions, they just gather more and more money for the wealthy people and pay less and less money for the poorer people. And maybe these Generation Z guys have it right, because you get stuck, you get started in something, and you think this is going to be your career for the rest of your life, let's say. Like I was going to be a tool and die maker at one point. All of a sudden, the recession came along, and every tool and die place closed down, never to reopen for most of them. So I guess that career had to go by the wayside. And I've been through several of these flushings, the recessions that flush the workers down the toilet and the businesses down the toilet, and somehow the rich just keep getting richer on this deal. It's strange. So thank you.